This is the Hartford Online Radio Network. 21st Century Audio. Delivered on thehorn.com.
You're listening to On the Horn, the Hartford Online Radio Network. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Sponsored by Gateway Financial Group, the accounting firm of Budwitz & Meyer, Jack, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, Sherpa Technologies, and Central CT Dental.com. Big show tonight. Speaker of the House, Chris Donovan, running for Congress, is joining us here. And we also have author Kara Dawn Goodwin. Until He Comes is the book Simon & Schuster released today. Book signing at Grant's this Friday in West Hartford. Be sure to tune in for that. But first, we're going to look over to our good friend Dave Moore and get a little Dave Moore news from the blogosphere. Dave, you're up.
Thank you, Brian. From our friends at CT News Junkie, Supreme Court orders appointment of redistricting special master. The Connecticut Supreme Court issued an order today regarding the appointment of a special master to assist the court in the redistricting of the congressional districts of Connecticut. The court invited attorneys for the Democratic and Republican parties to either agree to a special master or submit their choice to the court by Friday, along with a brief as to what should be considered for the role for special master. Those briefs are due by 10. They're going to be explaining themselves at 1. The court will appoint a special master on January 5th, with proceedings to take place January 6th through the 18th, and the special master is to submit a report to the court by January 27th of 2012. The parties are to further submit briefs about the report by February 1st, reply briefs by February 3rd, with the court submitting its plan to the Secretary of State by February 12th. In the meantime, the Redistricting Commission is to continue on meeting and working, and the court hopes reach an agreement while the process is ongoing. From our friends at Creditable.com, Connecticut Church recognized for being energy efficient. St. John's Episcopal Church in Vernon, Connecticut, has been recognized as the energy efficient winner by the Interfaith Power and Light organization of this year's Cool Congregations Challenge. The contest is nationwide and is a united effort by religious congregations across the country to address global warming by reducing their carbon footprint and by becoming inspirations to their members and communities. Winners were selected from 4 categories: energy efficiency, renewable energy, sustainable grounds, and water conservation, and inspiring their congregants to be more energy efficient. St. John's won the category for energy efficient by reducing their carbon footprint. From our friends at the New Haven Independent, school spokesman resigns. 2 days after an outburst in which he grabbed an independent reporter's camera and demanded that she stop filming, New Haven school spokesman Chris Hoffman has announced his resignation effective January 31st, 2012. Hoffman, who was an investigative reporter for the New Haven Register, joined the school district in February 2011. Immediately after the incident with the reporter, Hoffman apologized. There has been no discussion as to whether there will be another person filling the $78,793 per year position once Hoffman leaves office. From our friends at the Hartford Advocate, Connecticut.com, East Haven racial profiling having a statewide impact. Last week's federal report of racial profiling against Latinos by the East Haven Police Department is having a ripple effect throughout the state of Connecticut. There is a 12-year-old statute prohibiting racial profiling that is now being revisited by state officials as a result of the report. $1.2 million in federal money is available to pull together information on who local and state police are stopping and why, but those federal grants haven't been touched for years. Governor Daniel P. Malloy is now requesting access to those funds. I'm Dave Moore, and that's all your More News.
All right, thank you, David. All those stories can be found on IMNCT, Independent Media Network of Connecticut, and, of course, on the Horn, on thehorn.com. Let us get to our featured guest here, Chris Donovan. I met Chris, what was it, in August or so, when we were both guests on Meet the State and on Channel 3. And got to talking and said, hey, you know what, you might make an interesting guy since you're running for Congress to come on the show and discuss some of these issues. part of our continuing Meet the Candidates segment that we started back all the way in 2008. So, Chris, welcome.
Brian, thank you.
It is great to have you here. Let's just kind of go through some of these issues and figure out exactly why in this tumultuous time you would want to run for U.S. Congress. The seat, by the way, from Chris Murphy, who's going to run for Joe Lieberman's Senate seat, the moving chairs continues here in Connecticut. But so why do you want to run for office?
Well, Brian, I've been working for families all my life. It's what I do. I was a community organizer for a while before I became a state representative. But as a state rep, I've worked on a lot of issues that helps the average person. So when I see what's going on in Washington, I say, well, we need somebody down in D.C. who's going to fight for people and get things done. So whether it's health care or jobs or Social Security, Medicare, they need someone who's going to be not only fight for the people, but also make things happen. That's why I'm running.
Jobs and economy, that's the very first issue on your website, ChrisDonovanForCongress.com. And you say you want to help the middle class come back to Connecticut. That's a nice term, but I'm always struggling to figure out who is middle class.
Well, if you ask everybody, I think everybody thinks they are. Right? So whether you're making $30,000 or $300,000, a lot of people think they're middle class. But I think, we have a general idea of people who work every day, try to raise a family, have a home, and I guess save for retirement. That's pretty much the picture, and enough to get by and not have that many worries. So that's who we're working for. And when you look at what's going on in the world, we're worried about jobs. People are worried about jobs every day. I was listening to, on the way down here, one of those finance advice channels on the radio. He was saying, it's much harder for people to retire these days because the interest rates are low, people are living longer, healthcare costs are high, and no one has really any pensions anymore. So it's really tough. So we have to really look at the average person and try to make things better for them. I think that's what it's all about.
That's an interesting point about the pensions and not saving enough. And one of the issues that our economic guru, Professor Albert Brenner, always brings up is the Social Security system was supposed to be, at 62, you could start to get stuff. 65, it really kicks in. But the life expectancy back in 1930 was 59. So if we wanted to adjust that for lifestyle inflation or just longevity in inflation, you'd have to move when you can get Social Security up to age 82 or 85. You wouldn't be in support of that, would you?
Not at all. Now, my grandfather, he lived to be 93. He was born in 1886, so he was off the charts, I guess, there. But, the whole idea with Social Security, we have enough money to fund Social Security, except the federal government has been borrowing from that.
It hasn't been borrowing, I guess. It's actually collected more than it pays out. It's just then they are stuck with this task of prudent man investing, which means they have to buy treasuries, which then gets invested in.
I think if we, I think the Social Security program has lasted, and as people have gotten older, it's worked for them as well. People are getting older. That's true. So that's a reality. So then. But we still don't want 85-year-olds working, and they should have time off and enjoy themselves. That's the whole dream we have in advancing as a society. We want to make things better for senior citizens and for kids. And right now, I feel that's not happening. And the breadwinners are having a rough time as it is as well. So, you talk about jobs. We bailed out Wall Street and said, okay, we're going to put you on steady footing because we don't want the financial industry to collapse. And all right, now help us create jobs. And what we found was a lot of people in the finance industry did not create jobs. They held on to that bucks. They made more money. And at the same time, we hear small businesses, we hear other people clamoring to get bank loans and credits. They are not getting it. They can't hire people. And as a result, we're not getting the jobs. So, if we can't get it by bailing out the banks and having them invest in our country, then we have to figure out another way. So let's look at creating jobs other ways. There's teachers we've lost all kinds of teachers. Towns throughout the country have cut back on thousands of teachers. I think we ought to have teachers. We should have teachers. There are students graduating from Central right now that have a degree, ready to teach, and they're looking for a job. We can hire them, reduce the class load in the schools, and put people to work.
I don't disagree. You were hinting on, and your website does too, helping everyone, working hard families reach the American dream. My picture of the American dream is you can retire, play with your grandkids, and live out the next, decade or so, the golden years, and not worry about where your next meal is.
How about roast beef on Sunday and golf? That'd be good.
Love it. Yeah. No, I absolutely.
But I could deal with that.
But it seems to me that the idea of the American dream has gotten much richer.
Yeah.
It seems to be, I want 2 houses. I want a,
Well,
I want
that's
a
not-
sports car. I want this. It seems that we desire money more than, the generations ago.
I mean, certainly everybody would like to live in a palace with maids and servants and stuff, but I don't think that right now that's not even the closer reality. Right now, people are having a hard time paying for their single home right now, and people are worried about sending their kids to college or telling their kids you're not going to college, or worried about their parents getting sick and saying, what am I going to do with that? I mean, right now, people don't have real confidence in having, as you said, the basics of working, providing for your family, and retiring. That is not a concept right now that a lot of families are confident with. And that's why I'm running for Congress, is that ought to be. We should make sure that in the global market, our kids are the best educated out there. That's not the case right now. We should make sure that our senior citizens, our parents, our grandparents are treated with dignity and respect. I mean, can you imagine having to deal with, getting old and then finding out that you don't have enough money for your health care, so you go on a Medicare, and there's a whole industry in giving your house to your kids so you can go on the state and get your health care taken care of. That's becoming commonplace right now.
Sure.
That's not
Get
the dream
yourself
that
to
people have.
Title 19. Yeah.
I mean, that's not a great life for that person.
No, not at all.
So,
you hinted at it earlier, education, very
Right.
big for you. I have struggled with this issue too, and I don't know what the answer is. I've talked to a lot of educators, and all of them seem to say money is actually not the issue. It's trusting educators to educate and not requiring these standardized tests.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the solution to our ugly, ugly education problems in the United States?
well, there's people talk about ugly problems, but there are some good things too. I mean, my kids grew up in Meriden. They went to the Meriden school system, and if you look on charts, sometimes Meriden doesn't look like it gets it doesn't get good marks. But my kids got a great education. They're going to the top schools. Well, they went to the top schools in the country. They got a great education. But the problem is, as you said, with the testing. In Meriden, you test a kid at a specific time. Now, in Meriden, housing's affordable, so people come and move in and move out of Meriden. So you may be testing a kid in 8th grade who just walked in the door. That kid could not walk in a door in other areas where housing is much more expensive. So you tend to have more of a stable educated student body in those towns where housing is more expensive. But in a town where the housing is less expensive, kids walk in the door and they're tested, and that is reflected in what's going on in Meriden in terms of scores. Also, with the No Child Left Behind test, we went to court to say, hey, can we give the tests in the language that the kid is comfortable with? In Meriden, we have a number of children who are come from Puerto Rico, which is a part of the United States. They come here, and some of those students don't speak English very well. They are tested in English, and when they're tested in English, they're going to fail that test. We have other students who come from other countries. When they're tested in English, they're going to fail those tests. So I believe the tests. We actually went to court and tried to get the federal government to say, let us give the test in another language and really show where our kids are. In the 1960s. In California, there were students. The legal services sued the state of Connecticut, the state of California, saying that kids are tested in English, and what was happening was that if they failed the test, they were put into special education classes. They found there was 22,000 kids in California that because they spoke Spanish, they were put in special education classes. I mean, that's an outrage, and we're doing that again now in Connecticut. Now, I believe that what's happening now, there's some really good innovative ideas that's happening in New Haven and actually in my town as well. The new commissioner of education came down. working with the teachers, working with the families, working with the administration, learning, trying to figure out ways to educate our kids and put them on the best track. I feel optimistic for the first time in a number of years that the state is moving in the right direction to provide every kid with the opportunity to learn.
We're talking to Speaker of the House of Representatives for Connecticut, Chris Donovan, running for Congress. Let's talk about civil rights. There is a balance, a threefold balancing act between freedoms, rights, and handouts that I think the arguments on civil rights grapple with every day. We saw a town in Connecticut wanting to have their graduation ceremony at it was a church or a cathedral or something, over in Bloomfield. Really, I don't see anything wrong with that, but the ACLU gets involved and said this is terrible, that there's church and state issues, which really there weren't if you look at the letter of the law. What do you think about those kind of lawsuits, and how do we balance between rights and freedoms and handouts?
Well, everybody wants to be treated with dignity and respect. That's kind of a basic thing. And how do you protect that in a diverse society? So on one end, you have to say, okay, we tolerate everybody. Well, that's easy to say. It's not happen everywhere. There are people who discriminate against certain people. So that's out there. I think, but if people have objections, if people say, you know what, that I object to this as in a public institution, I think there's pause for government to say, what should we do about it? I was in a classroom reading to students the other day, and the idea was about a rich king who was greedy and wanted everything. And the concept was that this king was greedy, and when he started giving things away, he felt better. And actually, this is 5th grade. The teacher said, all right, children, what is the inference in this book? Well, I was checking my Google to see what inference meant. No, but the kids were great. They said it. And one kid said it's better to give than to receive. I thought, wow, this is really good. It really shows. I was really impressed with the teacher and what was going on. But the message was certainly around Christmas time, and the kids were around Christmas time. So I started talking to the kids about that. And this one little kid in the back says, hey, my family doesn't do Christmas. And you could see that he felt a little left out. Right. So I engaged him. I said, what do you do in your religion? And, he says, we fast and then we eat a lot. So we talked about that a little bit, so we got to talk about that. But I think it's recognizing that not everybody's the same, but also giving tolerance for people who are different. And I think that when we do that, and in that classroom, the other kids were kind of proud that he had something different, and they enjoyed that as well. So I think we have to take pride in our diversity, but also recognize that we should be tolerant of others. But all that doesn't mean we lose our own particular sense of religion or identity or culture as well. We share it.
I think that dovetailed nicely into the next topic, which is foreign policy, national security. There is an awful lot going on around the world, and I think that this is just going to be, with this information age, and the world is so small now, it's always going to be right on our radar screen. But, we have things going on in North Korea, which I want you to comment on. And then how do you think President Obama has done? I'm looking at what happened in Libya, Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And, and I'll be very upfront, I'm very Republican, very conservative. I got to tell you, Obama, I think, knocked it out of the park on, foreign policy and national security. So, but, what do we do with places like North Korea now, where we have the boy king?
Well, it's still pretty much a mystery right now. I think they're saying they're seeing more of North Korea than they've seen in decades. The stories that came out about what was told to the populace about the former king and his exploits on the golf course and amazing misinformation going at it. Again, like what's going on in the Arab world, it's a challenge for us, and it's an opportunity for us as well. We've had tough years with North Korea in the last few years. Mainly due to the personality of then king. I think we need to reach out very aggressively to the new king and saying there's a better way. We can help the populace of your country, where people apparently are starving and their growth are stunted, and the United States can play a role. I know In South Korea, there's a real bitterness towards the former king. I think maybe the United States can move into a place where maybe South Korea can't move, and try to pull them in and help them change in a way that is helpful to the area as well as helpful to the United States and helpful to their own people. So I see this as a real opportunity. I think we should do our best to say, all right, there's a new king. Let's deal with that.
Cuba, our neighbor to the south.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure Castro's still alive either, but maybe he is.
We haven't heard anything lately. Have we?
We
No.
haven't. And actually, when
It's been about 6 months. Really, we haven't heard anything for about 6 months.
I would.
Raul came in. He made some changes that were
Small changes.
small changes, but they were significant changes. And then nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know whether it's the media or I just haven't heard.
I only noticed it when President Kim Jong-il of North Korea, we heard passed away, and I said, "Geez, what happened to Castro? We haven't heard anything from there." But do you think that there's an opportunity here where we say, "Okay, enough of this embargo," the great Russian threat, which it's not there as it once was, but it's no longer there. Do we lift those sanctions? Do we let people go in there, create a little industry, or how do we handle Cuba?
There is a lot of interest from Cuba itself, from Cubans living here in America, and from America to say, we need to deal with this in a rational way. The Cold War is over. The Berlin Wall is down. We have a Navy base in Cuba. We have a Navy base. I think people in America don't realize that, but we have Gitmos in Cuba. Again, it's a country that is it's not a wealthy country. We've had good relations with them before the Castro regime. I think there's an opportunity for us to open up stronger diplomatic relations and try to find ways to help that country and help us as well. I don't see them as a threat to our national security, but I think we have to deal with a history, but also be willing to move on and make it better for everybody. I mean, I think a model I often think about in terms of moving on, South Africa. Here's a country that the populace, the majority populace, was treated horribly, not given rights, but with the end of apartheid, they reconciled and they moved on and said that was the past. Let's move towards the future. I think we need to deal with that.
I think you're right. I think that South Africa overcoming apartheid was a great model.
Hey, even the Irish are getting along. It's pretty good.
Right? Hey, Well, just wait a second. I think there's someone's tapping a new keg. We'll get right back on.
Hey, wait a minute.
Very quickly, I'm going to touch about energy and the environment. I think everyone's for the environment. No one really doesn't want the environment. But what bothers me is the secondary markets for these energy clean chits. If you go and you buy biofuel for your house, and it's a nice little thing, but the guy who's making the biofuel, he can't stay in business unless he gets these environmental chits that he can sell on some secondary market to someone who's not being so environmentally friendly. I would just, is there a way that we can just blow some life into these kind of things? We're coming off Solyndra, which was a disaster for the president, both from the reality of losing all those tax dollars, but also from, you're going to lose a lot of public support for what you really need is a little government help in an industry that's going to help us all. But how do we get rid of this secondary market of these chits where people who are not being very environmentally conscious can purchase their it's almost like purchasing the incidentals to get into heaven,
It's like, I was big on Irish, during Civil War, they purchased not to go to Civil War, not to be drafted, you purchase your way so you don't fight. Some poor Irish guy off the boat goes. But, I think on the energy, it's certainly I noticed from from politics, they have a lot of interest, and they have people who are in the energy business, have no lack of providing information to legislators and others.
Mm-hmm.
So they're out there spreading their message, and they come up with plans to further it. I mean, we know we need to change from burning fossil fuels to looking at renewable sources of energy, and we've made some progress in the last couple of years. And we had a fight over the budget because I remember we had some tax credits for people moving into solar, et cetera, here in Connecticut, and then Governor Rell wanted to get rid of that and grab some funds that were available to provide loans and grants to people. So, sometimes it becomes part of the budget fight what to do with that as well. But we know we have to go there, and we know there can be successes. People want to put up windmills. We find out there's problems with windmills, and there's glare coming off. There's all kinds of things that we need to deal with. So I think with energy and with other issues we face, they can be as complicated as we want them to be. And people can come up with schemes like selling, I'm going to pollute, but if I buy your pollution free, I'm off the hook. That's not the direct way to do it. I think we need to make sure that everybody reduces their emissions. We need to do it on a national level as well, because some states like Connecticut, we have strong air pollution laws, but our neighboring state may not. And so there's an incentive for them to get businesses that are saving money on energy. So I think there has to be a more stringent national plans on energy and on the environment, so everybody knows what the game is at the beginning. They know how they have to compete within that game, and everybody feels we're all on the same level, and they compete fairly. Because right now, if you can buy the chits, you can pollute all you want, and if you can't, you can't. So that's not fair. So we need to do stuff along those lines.
Right. Your website, we're talking to Speaker of the House, Chris Donovan, running for Congress. Your website spends a lot of time on clean government and free and fair elections,
Mm-hmm.
quote, are the foundation on which American democracy rests.
Okay.
I'm all for that. I was talking when Daniel Malloy was running. He came in, sat with us for an hour, and this was probably the topic that we grappled with together the most: campaign finance,
Mm-hmm.
getting big money out of the elections. This next presidential election is probably going to be $1 billion. $1 billion. I mean, it's really, the gig only pays like $500,000 a year. I mean, I know you get a nice jet and stuff, but come on, guys. My problem has been, on one side, I'm very much for the idea of, hey, look, I made my money and I got some opinions, and if it cost money to buy advertising or whatever, and I need to fund that, I'm willing to do it because, it's my money. Leave me alone. But on the other side, that argument is met with, it's my free speech, because one person has more money. That would mean then some Americans have more free speech than others. And then my argument falls right in the toilet. So I don't know where I really come down on this. Where do you kind of come down, or what are your thoughts?
Well,
Can we discuss what could be done?
I mean, as someone who's run for office, and, sometimes once you run for office, people are like, oh, you're a politician. Well, there was a time when I didn't run for office. I was just an average Chris. And
what did you do? What was your job? I don't even know.
I was a community organizer, and then I was a labor worker for a number of years as well.
What does a labor worker mean?
I worked for community college teachers.
Okay.
Helped them out. So,
getting that Villanova.
Yeah, right. It was community college.
There you go.
But I also teach too. But so
you couldn't get into Fairfield. That's why.
So, where the heck was I? Okay. So I had to run for office. And, I had ideas and, people supporting me. And guess what? I needed to raise money. So I had to raise money, I guess, the old-fashioned way. Try to ask friends, everybody I know, ask people for money. But I was running for state representative, so I could go door to door, and I could pretty much talk to everybody. So money was an issue because you needed to get mailings out, but you didn't do TV, but you had to hire staff to make sure you're doing it right. So you needed some money. But you could go door to door if you did the work, and you could talk to everybody in the district. Well, once you run for state senate, it's a whole different thing. You can't go door to door. If you run for statewide office, you run for Congress, you run for other offices, you really can't do that. And so we didn't have rules. We had rules on limiting how much a person could give, but really favored the incumbent in a lot of ways, because other people would say, hey,
Sure.
I'd like to run against Joe.
And maybe it should. The incumbent's in there, knows a little bit about what's going on in the game. So
Yeah, but at least somebody else couldn't even get in the game because they'd say, hey, who are you thinking about running against? I'm thinking about running against Joe. Well, are you going to raise any money? I can't, because everybody's giving their money to Joe, because Joe would get all the money because he's the incumbent. And people were saying, who are lobbyists or others would say, well, I'm going to put my money on the person who's going to win. If you could tell me you're going to win and beat Joe, I'll give you the money. But other than that, I'm not going to give you the money. So the people who didn't have a chance to raise money.
But couldn't they give to both candidates?
Yeah, but you're not going to do that. If Joe's going to win, Joe's going to say, hey, I heard you gave money to my opponent. But the reality was, if you worked your way and you got elected, you had an advantage in raising money. That's what it was. So we changed that in Connecticut. We passed public financing of campaigns. Granted, it took a governor going to jail to do it. But Jody Rell just wanted to limit the amount of money that people could raise. But we said that's not fair too, because again, that would give an advantage to people who have a lot of money. They would raise money, and people who don't have money would not be able to get in the game at all. So we set up a public financing. So in Connecticut right now, for state representative, I raise $5,000 of increments of $100 or less, $5 or more, $100 or less, and $150 from my town, and the rest anywhere else, but it has to be $5,000, and the state will give the candidate $25,000 to run a race, and that's enough to run a race for state representative. We do that for Senate as well, and so lobbyists can give $100, but that's all they can give. They can't give thousands of dollars. My neighbor can give $5, and that counts as well. So we have a system in Connecticut now, and actually when we passed it, we had to get people who benefited from the system to vote against their own self-interest because they realized it was good government. So someone could say, I'm not going to get in that system and raise $60,000. Well, yeah, but $60,000 in a state rep race, you're wasting your money. $30,000 is about right. So right now we have $30,000 a state rep can do. In a state Senate race, I believe it's $90,000.
Yep,
$90,000. And the governor, we made it so that the governor can earn $6 million. And it comes out of, we're looking for a fund. Everybody's saying, well, you're using taxpayer dollars. And it turns out that we have this fund. I call it the unclaimed freight fund, but it's the fund where everybody puts their money cards they get for Christmas and they lose them or stick them in a sock drawer, or it's in their wallet. And so the people don't redeem them when we have the fund of all those unredeemed amounts. And it runs anywhere from about $30 million or so a year. So it's not a tax fund. It's a fund that's just sitting there, and we use that it funds our system. I think it works. There's been a real difference at the Capitol. The people who are freshmen and run only on campaign financing, public financing, they don't know any other way. And when a lobbyist comes up to them and talks to them about an issue, they say, well, convince me whether it's a good issue or a bad issue. Not that, well, you had a fundraiser for me and you raised $10,000 for me. I'll be objective, but you did raise me $10,000. So there's that. And I think that ought to happen on the national level as well, because there's a lot of money being spent. And again, the people who have the money are getting at least face time. And I wouldn't say influence, but they are getting face time.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of setting, whatever you're running for, and each state would do it on its own, and then the national elections, maybe based on, the population of the state that you have to reach. So Connecticut, kind of a small state, we would get less money for folks running for Congress or Senate or whatever. And say you pick a number, I don't even know what it would be, but $10 million to run for senator. I don't know, $6 million, whatever the number is. And then if you want that, great, that's all the money you have, and you can't have anyone contribute to you, but you're going to get $10 million in taxpayer money, and so is your opponent.
Right.
And then you're on an even playing field.
Right.
And if your message sucks,
you lose.
You lose.
Right.
And that way, it's not just – now, on the other side, we look at the – I don't know what you call it, the McMahon factor, who spent, I don't know, $30 trillion on trying to get elected, and she barely got anyone to vote for. But that's a great case of it doesn't actually matter how much you spend. If your message stinks, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, but you can.
You can bludgeon people.
Right. You can affect public opinion if you're on. I think
if you got someone like Gabe working for you who can really utilize that money,
he could. He works marvelous. But I think McMahon was a unique case too, because she had a certain image that was kind of a hard sell to certain people. So there was that to begin with, and she was running against Dick Blumenthal, who people had this high degree of support for. Yeah. So I mean, that was a unique case.
No,
but
yeah.
if it was, two other candidates and one just had a lot of money and just was all over and had great television and great radio, et cetera, et cetera, I mean, that they really could have an influence. And so what we did in Connecticut, well, I think more closely was the gubernatorial race we had between Dan Malloy and Tom Foley, whereas Tom Foley did have all that money, and Dan Malloy went through the public financing system. And originally we had the system set up that we'd give $3 million to the gubernatorial to lower the amount. And then if the opposing candidate did not participate, you get another $3 million if they went over. The Supreme Court, the national Supreme Court, federal Supreme Court said you couldn't do triggers like that. So we just changed the law to say you get $6 million because that's how much money he did. So he got $6 million. Foley spent much more than $6 million. But Dan Malloy was able to win, just barely able to win.
It was a close race. I sat with both of them, for one of these hour-long interviews. And I'll tell you, I was certainly a Foley guy. I liked the ambassador. I thought he was bright. He was a Republican. I'm a Republican. At the end of the day, and I'm going to give you a chance to do this too, I asked kind of like the throwaway questions, like, why you want to be governor or something like that. And he paused for a moment and just said, I'm ready. And I was like, oh, that's actually surprisingly good. And I ended up voting for the guy. But good stuff. We've been talking with Chris Murphy. I will let you have this.
Donovan.
Oh, that's why. Because, Chris Murphy is not. Hey, Chris Murphy endorse you yet?
No, he's running for Senate right now. But we're friends.
We're friends?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have been.
You want him to
I have been introduced by friends as Chris Murphy.
Oh, jeez.
But my name is Donovan, and my webpage is Chris Donovan for Congress.
I wanted to ask if Chris Murphy endorsed you, and that's what I wrote on the piece of paper here.
Okay.
But that's great. I will let you have the last word. What's the last thing or the most important thing you want listeners to know about Chris Donovan running for Congress?
I guess what I said at the outset, I've been fighting for families since I started. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm in this crazy business called politics, because we need somebody there who says, you know what? People should get a decent wage. People should be able to afford health care. People should make sure their kids go to college if they want to, or whatever. And you need somebody whose interest is, number one, looking out for families. That's all I've done my life. You can check my record. It's what I've done. I've been consistent. And not only that, I've risen to become Speaker of the House, so I show I can not only work with others, but I can actually get laws passed that really help people. So they need that in Washington real bad right now.
That is Chris Donovan right there. I can guarantee you, folks, he's a real guy. He's not just a politician. He's a real human being. If you like what he said, send him to Congress. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here.
We're going to take a quick little break, and we'll be back after this with author Kara Dawn Goodwin. Her new book, Until He Comes, from Simon & Schuster, out today. We'll be right back.